Howdy folks, my name's Christian and welcome to Bullish on Farming. Today just moved the main herd into kind of a segue that meets two fields. We got a pasture that the cattle will be moving into tomorrow over there, and they came from the pasture over there. If you hadn't seen the previous video we made, it was about how that field was a little bit weaker and had been taken by weeds, and how we graze it, and the carbon that we lay down on it. Talked a little bit about winter bale grazing as well and how that helps. I wanted to show this mom here because in the past video she was limping, and I talked a little bit about, generally didn't want to speak too much until I evaluated it. So I took a look at it, and she's actually walking better today. It's her front left, and you may not be able to see on the camera, but it's not showing any signs of being swollen. And if it was swollen, then it would be something more severe, and it could possibly be an infection. And with an infection, you want to see the underside of the hoof to see if there's any rot or coloration. And the more experienced you are with cattle, you know what that looks like. But I could tell by the way she was putting her leg out that it was muscular, because she was favoring her leg on a certain angle, but still able to bear full weight. So it kind of looked like someone when they sprain their ankle. And if I just get her moving a bit here, excuse me, she's looking well fine. And by running cattle out on pasture, folks, tweaking a leg, these things happen. They're living, breathing animals. And just like us, they have skeleton systems and muscles that can tweak, fatigue, and all sorts of things. So we evaluate our animals and our land daily. So we're not really worried about, situations turning into an emergency, because we like to get on things before they evolve into that. But it's just another point as to why checking your cattle and the land are so important daily. It really just goes in line with the management intensive style of regenerative techniques with livestock, such as mob grazing and pasture rotations. And I'm noticing that the cattle are getting a little pickier because they've been grazing so well all year, the top half of every plant. They've been getting their fair choice of tender, soft grasses, and that's what the cattle prefer, especially the older cattle. And as we get into the later part of the season, although, a section like this would have had 70 days of rest, it's got quite a big bush section in there too. So plenty of grass in there is what I'm trying to say. We are October 15th or 16th today. And so some of the length that is left that the cattle will have to choose from will be some of the thicker stem, rougher grasses that aren't as palatable for the cattle, especially the older cattle. When they start to lose their teeth, they seem to be more picky with what they forage. If you come into a paddock, you'll notice that a bunch of the younger cattle will have full rumens, while the older ones will be punched in. And yes, although it takes more feed for that larger cow to be full, she doesn't look like she grazes too much, while the young ones, they go after pretty much anything. I've even had cattle eating thistle in its younger stages with enough pressure, believe it or not. And some folks who do strip grazing know that you can get your cattle to eat vegetation that they normally wouldn't. We had our cattle eating seed head after the grass got ahead of us on first pass, and we have videos talking about that. But as we can see, it's a happy mob. Just cleared out a family of deer in here before I moved the cattle in. They saw the mob coming, and they said, okay, let's let the big girls in. And so everything's looking good, folks. We've narrowed in on our calves, and at this point, we're looking at about 6-month-old calves. And our calves are looking good. Our calves are looking full. And the youngest in here would probably be about 2 months. And then there's some at 3 months. But you see this guy here, he's 5 months. He's got his tag wiped off. And the one in front of it probably similar. Got some nice round barrels on our calves, folks. That's what we're looking for, keeping our cattle on pasture as long as possible. and managing our land properly so that our land's ready to accommodate our animals, guaranteeing that our cattle are putting on as much weight as they can per day. And when you're growing out your calves, when the first 7-8 months of your calves' life is on pasture, getting nutrient-dense feed, you are setting them on track for success to move forward for your beef program. Whether that be for a beef cow or for a mama. And you want nice, proportionate, healthy mums that have good genes and to breed that back for you year after year. And so when I first turned the cattle in here, they just came in like a bat out of hell. They were stampeding. And, well, I had given them a 2-day paddock yesterday. It might be the reason why. But there was plenty of feed in there. All the cattle's rumens were full this morning, but something about turning out to a nice fresh section seems to always get them excited. They ran all the way to the end, swept through the paddock, and then they said, okay, we know where we are. Let's start grazing. And that's what cattle do. They'll observe the space that they have, and they'll observe it first and survey it first, and then they'll say, okay, where's the best grass? Let's go eat there. And the biggest cows eat first. And the calves are at the bottom of the pecking order, but when you're managing your paddock sizes properly, there is no competition for feed. Take a look at this bull calf here, this steer. Nice full boy. And her mums are looking good. They got to be, I don't know, let's see. When did we put the bull in? July 15th. So August, September. Some of these cows will be 2 to 3 months pregnant. And they're carrying a calf outside of them at about, oldest 6.5 months. And let's take a look at the field that we're going to be setting them out to. Because although I'd like to make a video on that alone, these are the 2 fields that I did talk about before. But now we got one over here and then one over to the left. And on our second lap, I decided to skip these fields because although they had 70 days rest by that point, the fields were just weak and didn't really have much to offer. Now, don't get me wrong, we had feed in there for the cattle, but if I grazed it, we wouldn't really have anything for third lap. So because the intention is to increase the fertility of our land and yield of our grass each year, I decided to skip that field because it was an investment decision to allow this field to grow out and express itself another 70 days. So let's see, 70, that's 140 days of rest. I got barbed wire here, so I'll hop over. And you can take a look, folks. Turning the cattle into here, we got 2 fields. The other one's a bit stronger. But we got about a foot of grass in here. And if I turned them out before, it probably would have been 6 to 8 inches. And continuing to mob graze and even bale graze some sections because it's quite thick here. It's actually about 2 feet, maybe even 2.5. There are some sections that are weaker down there that we'll focus on rolling out hay while we mob graze in here. But in here, we're gonna strip graze pretty hard. So I talked about in the previous fields how I give them double the surface resistance on the weak field. Although this is a weaker field, it has good vegetation density in certain areas. So I am going to strip graze it a bit harder, whether that be the standard size or taking it down by 10 yards or so in length. I'll keep you guys posted as I graze it. Because it's the last lap, we do want to keep some vegetation up top. But because there are some of the marshy grasses that the cattle like to skip over, putting a little bit more pressure is going to cause them to consume a wider variety of vegetation that will be available in their paddocks. So we'll see. I'm planning to get at least 5 or 6 days of grazing out of this field. But you evaluate it daily. And so that's just kind of a general call, knowing that on first lap, I think I did get 5 or 6 grazing days out of this. So you can see the cattle are balling because they've become picky. We grazed some really good pasture up until this point before, and I can tell that the cattle want to move before they're ready. They're starting to attempt, at least, at training the farmer. And the cattle are smart, folks, so if they move daily to fresh grass, even if they have feed to take down for another half day or another day, they'll bawl at you because they don't know how much grass is left on the farm. They're not managing the grazing acres. They just want the best feed every day. And so as a grazer, it is your job to manage the cattle and know when to move them. Sure, bawling can be a sign that they need to move, but if you go in there and you know your cattle and the program you've been running on them, you know, you can say, well, they're just bawling and being babies because they're used to moving every day. And there's plenty of feed in the paddock. So, things you learn along the way. You don't want your cattle training you, folks. Plus, they're used to my voice, and when I raise it, they think I'm calling them. Maybe they're just speaking up for the video, huh? Either way, folks, just moved them in here. They got 24 hours of feed in here at least. And you see they will graze those rhizome grasses. The ones that spread very quickly, but tend to get a little, not as tender as they get older. Just thicker and stiffer in the blade. But the cattle will graze them with enough pressure. So I'll come in tomorrow and evaluate this. And for their water, I'm just going to open up that gate. And I got a water line that meets me about halfway down the lane. And using poly braid, I'll just create a lane straight down, cut the trough in half with the braid. And that'll keep the cattle nice and tame around the water. Got their mineral tub at the far section, so I'll keep their traffic in between the water and the mineral at both sides of the paddock. And make sure that as they're walking back and forth, it's a high traffic area for the cattle to drop their manure and fertilize this whole lane. Yeah. Well, folks, it's Sunday. I want to thank you for stopping by. I got some other things to do today, but always a pleasure. God bless. Thank you for stopping by. We'll see you on the next one.